Hello. My name is Jones, and today we are going to look at childhood development reflexes. Okay, so childhood development reflexes are automatic, involuntary movements or responses that are present in infants and young children. These reflexes serve as important indicators of the neurological and physical development of the child. They are typically present at birth or shortly afterwards and gradually disappear as the child's nervous system, as the child's nervous system matures and as the child gains control over its nervous system. So, some of the things that we need to consider are some of the childhood development reflexes, that we can have as part of this discussion includes rooting reflex, sucking reflex, motor reflex, grasping reflex, Babinski reflex, stepping reflex, tonic neck reflex, asymmetrical tonic reflex, blinking reflex, crawling reflex, and the vestibulocerebral reflex. Okay, so those are 11, reflexes that we can talk about. So when you talk of rooting reflex, rooting reflex here is a reflex that occurs when an infant's cheek or mouth is touched. When an infant's cheek or mouth is touched, it will cause them to turn their head in the direction of the stimulus. You touch. Here is an infant, a child who's just been born. So when you touch a part of their cheek, it will cause them to turn their head in the direction of the stimulus. You put your breast on one part of the cheek of the baby, so the baby will now turn to the part where it has been touched. So this will help the baby to locate the source of nourishment, and of course here we are looking at the baby breastfeeding, because that is the expectant thing, that when you put the breast on the baby's cheek, the baby now will turn so that it can breastfeed. To just take it, now this is milk. So this is what we are calling rooting reflex. Rooting reflex, something touches the cheek of the baby turns towards the part where it has been touched. So we are calling that the rooting reflex. So the rooting reflex is present at birth, and it disappears around 4 months of age, as it gradually comes under voluntary control. So the rooting reflex, it's present at birth. The rooting reflex assists in the act of breastfeeding. A newborn infant will turn its head toward anything that strokes its cheek or mouth, searching for the object by moving its head steadily, so that they decrease the arc or distance between that, and then the baby will start breastfeeding, or until the baby has found that object. It can be bottle feeding, so until the baby has found that bottle, then it will start sucking. So the rooting reflex will simply turning of the baby to the direction of something that touches its cheek. Something also related to the rooting reflex here is the sucking reflex. So when an object is placed in the infant's mouth or their lips are touched with something, they will automatically start sucking. This reflex is essential for feeding. So the sucking reflex is common to all mammals and is present at birth. It is linked with the rooting reflex, and breastfeeding. It causes the child to instinctively suck anything that touches the roof of their mouth and stimulates the child to naturally start eating. So the sucking reflex here, it's anything that will touch the lips, okay, the lips of the child, and then the child starts now to suck. So that is to do with the sucking reflex. So we started with the rooting reflex. Okay, here is just about rooting reflex, about the direction, okay, of anything that touches the cheek. Then from the cheek we go to the lips. The lips we talk about sucking reflex. Okay, so the expression when you're talking about the sucking reflex, so it's activated when the nipple is placed between a child's lips and touches their palate. So they will instinctively place it between their tongue and palate to draw out the milk. So then milking, here the tongue moves from areola to nipple, coaxing milk from the mother to be swallowed by the child. So here I'm just trying to explain breastfeeding. So the baby will now start sucking or breastfeeding from the milk. Okay, then we have the moral reflex. Moral reflex, the other name is the startle reflex. Okay, this is an infantile reflex normally present in all infants up to 3 to 4 months of age as a response to a sudden loss of support. When the infant feels as if it is falling, it involves 3 distinct components. So the reflex is triggered by a sudden change within the baby's position. That is, if there is some kind of like loud noise, so the baby will respond by extending their arms, spreading their fingers, and aching their back, making an arc, so aching their back. Okay, following by bringing their arms back to their bodies, like when you're scared. Okay, so the infant is going to show that scare sign. So it is thought to be a primitive survival reflex. Okay, so that is the moral reflex, which we are saying an infantile reflex, okay, which is normally is present in infants, okay, up to 3 to 4 months, and it's a response to sudden loss of support, okay, causing the infant to react more like him in a scared kind of motion to try to defend or protect its body. So the movements are as I have just explained. So the reflex is triggered by that sudden change, and then the baby will respond by extending their arms, spreading their fingers, and aching their back, or making an arc, you get it? Followed by bringing their arms back to their body. Okay, so with the moral reflex explained, or moral or startle effect, okay, we can now look at grasping reflex. So if an object is pressed in an infant's palm or fingers, they will automatically close their fingers around that object. So this reflex will help the baby to hold onto the object. Okay, so the grasping reflex, or the palmar grasp reflex, okay, it's one of those primitive reflex which makes the child to hold on onto the object that is placed in their hand. A fetus can exhibit the reflex in utero as early as 16 weeks into the gestation period, and it can persist until 5 or 6 months of age after the child is born. When an object is placed in an infant's hand, in the palm, or child is stroked, okay, the fingers usually close. Okay, this is the reflex. This is the reflex that we see in the grasping reflex. As the object is grasped via the palm grasp, so you see that grasp. The grip is so strong but unpredictable. Okay, it may be able to support the child's weight. They may also release their grip suddenly and necessarily without warning. The reverse motion can be induced by stroking the back of the side of the hand. So we can have the reverse motion of the palmar reflex. Okay, so now with the grasping reflex explained, then we can now look at the Babinsk reflex. So when the sole of an infant's foot is stroked, their toes will fan out and the big toe will move upwards. This reflex disappears as the child grows and different response may develop. So what is happening in Babinski reflex is that there is a trigger, okay, like a gentle stroke on the sole of the foot that is from the heel to the toe. Then the response is that the foot will turn in and the toes are going to flare up. Okay, the foot turns in whilst the toes flare up. So that is what happens. So it appears at birth and lasts until the baby is about 6 to 24 months. Okay, the reason perhaps is that an infant is trying to protect itself against falling. Okay, then we can look at stepping reflex. Stepping, like child wants to walking. So if you hold a newborn upright and allow their feet to touch a flat surface, they will make stepping movements as if they are walking. This reflex disappears after a few weeks, but is a precursor of voluntary walking. So the walking or stepping reflex is present at birth, though infants, this young can support they cannot support their own weights, but we see the walking movement reflex. So when the soles of their feet is touched a flat surface, that is when you touch the sole of the feet on the flat surface, they will attempt to walk by placing one foot in front of the other. So this reflex is going to disappear around 5 to 6 months as infant starts to attempt to walk after this reflex has disappeared. Okay, then with the stepping reflex or the walking reflex explained, then we can look at the tonic neck reflex, or the fencing reflex. When an infant head is turned to one side, their arm and the leg on that side are also going to extend, while the opposite arm and leg also will flex. So it resembles a fencer's pose and usually disappears after a few months. So that is why it is also known as the fencing reflex, because of the characteristic position of an infant's arm and head, which resembles classically of a trained fencer. So when the face is turned to one side, in tonic neck, the arm and the leg on the other side, the face is turned and extended, and the arm and the leg on the opposite is flexed. So that is the fencer reflex or the tonic neck reflex. Then we have the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. This reflex occurs when an infant's head is turned to one side. The arm of the side and the head is facing extended, while the opposite arm is bent, or bent. So this reflex also plays a role in early motor development. Asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. It occurs when the infant's head is turned to one side, then the arm on the side and the head is the head is facing. So these on the opposite arm and the legs, they are also going to bend. Then we have the blinking reflex. This is a sudden bright light or puff of air that may cause the child to blink. This reflex will help protect the eyes of the child and potentially from other stimuli that may harm the baby's eyes. Then we have the crawling reflex. When an infant is pressed on their stomach, they may demonstrate crawling movements. This reflex is thought to be a precursor of actual crawling when the baby is older. Lastly, we can look at the vestibular ocular reflex. So the activation of this reflex, here we are saying where activation of the vestibular cochlear system causes the eye movement. You see what we call vestibular ocular reflex. This reflex functions to stabilize images on the retina. Okay, that is inoculate vision or clarification within the processing or perception of the child. So during head movements, by the child who is going to produce eye movement in the direction opposite to the head movement. So in this way, there is preservation of the image on the center of the visual field. For example, when the head moves to the right, the eyes move to the left, and vice versa, since slight head movement is present at all time. Okay, so we have been looking at childhood reflexes. Okay, so it is important to note the presence, the strength, and the timing of these reflexes. Okay, because they can vary among infants. So as healthcare professionals, okay, and parents, mothers, fathers to children, it's important to monitor the development and the disappearance of these reflexes as part of assessing the child's neurological and motor development. If the reflexes persist beyond the expected age or do not develop as expected, it may indicate an underlying neurological issue, and further evaluation may be needed. There you have it. Today we have been looking at childhood development reflexes, and we have talked about different childhood development reflexes that are there: the rooting reflex, the sucking reflex, the Moro reflex, the grasping reflex, the Babinski reflex, the stepping reflex, the tonic neck reflex, asymmetrical tonic reflex, the blinking reflex, pulling reflex, and then lastly, the vestibular ocular reflex. So from me, I'm saying thank you and keep studying.